This slide here is a big zoomed in look here. You have to appreciate that in your body, you have 600,000 miles of capillaries, and capillaries are the smallest end blood vessels, and this is a capillary here, and capillaries are so tiny that the red blood cells, which carry oxygen to the tissue and drop it off, have to bend down and squeeze and can only go through the capillaries in single file. Now keep in mind that the white blood cells are structurally bigger than the red blood cells, and that gets important later on in this video series where we'll show you why this is a problem in terms of causing the strokes and the blood sludging we're talking about. But here, as you see, the red blood cells are going through the capillary single files. 600,000 miles of capillaries in your body. In fact, 95% of the blood vessels in your body, 95%, are capillaries. The smallest, tiniest ones, microscopic, we cannot see them with anything that medical diagnostics have. You can't go to your doctor, go to the emergency department, go to the family practice unit, or go anywhere where they're going to look at you and say, oh yeah, your capillaries are blocked. We can't see it. It's silent. So we don't see it, we don't know what's going on. And worse than that, because you can have silent damages happening from this blood sludging problem right before your eyes, and you don't even know what's actually happening, but it's causing profound disease and setup for disease and brain damage here and now to your child, and possibly leading to sudden infant death. But when you know this process exists and that we are blind to it as parents, physicians, scientists, and society as a whole, it becomes a concern. And the concern now, when you recognize it's there, it's a concern that can be addressed and dealt with. This slide here basically is looking at about 9 children or infants, all who died from prenatal exposure. Again, I'm just using congenital rubella or German measles as an example. But all 9 of these infants who were exposed to this infectious disease show evidence when they died in every organ, across every organ system in the body, of damage to the small blood vessels and causing clotting, ischemia, strokes, and coagulation. Every organ. This tells you one bug, every organ, lack of oxygen, stroke-like phenomena, generic problem across the board. Is this a problem just with prenatal exposure to German measles? No, it's a problem with all foreign things entering your body, whether it's polio, paralysis, tetanus, measles, mumps, rubella, mercury, aluminum, fluoride, all of these things, even dietary substances. Now we know the mechanism is here relative to causing this problem of blood clotting. All of these things individually, collectively, or in summation can actually cause these problems that we now call autism. So here we go on an idea. It's important to understand how blood flow works going to the brain. The heart pumps each beat, and with each beat, it's keep in mind that the pulse pressure, or the blood pressure you have into your brain or through your blood vessels, goes up and goes down. And it's not a continuous flow forward. You have pressure going up and you have pressure going down. And here we're going to go through the pressure wave as each heartbeat works and go up into the actual brain. And we have the circle of Willis, the main part of the circle where the main arteries go out to the brain to give oxygen and tissue delivery. You have the carotid arteries coming up through the neck, and you have the vertebral arteries, which are buried back further here, which come up and give off to an artery called the basilar artery, which gives off blood vessels to all of the posterior part of the brain. These areas are critical to creating some of the neurological features we'll show you here shortly. So here we have the entire sequence of one heartbeat, in which the blood's going to go up through the carotid arteries, vertebral arteries, to the circle of Willis, go out to the brain, and then there's a back pressure and it goes through the cycle again. So the brain gets oxygen in series of pulse waves, like this repetitively with each heartbeat, up, down, up, down. Now, if you follow the top slides here, you will see that you'll follow the wave of blood as it comes up through the carotid arteries, goes circle Willis, gets up high, and you see the brain becomes redder and redder. It's getting more perfused, and then the pressure doesn't go again. The key thing here and this is important to the adverse events as well as sudden infant death, is to recognize that the brain responds to changes in the brain responds to its needs based on pulse waves. The brain's big blood vessels and some smaller blood vessels down the arterioles, they respond to pressure in the inside blood vessel walls. So if the pressure drops, you've got a drop in blood pressure. The brain senses this by the lack of pressure being pushed on these inside blood vessel walls in the brain, and it sends signals down the heart to speed up the heartbeat. It sends signals off to the lungs to increase respiration rate, and the brain knows to do these things based on these pressure receptors. The key thing is that in the brain there are no flow receptors, meaning if you have adequate pressure but you have no forward blood flow, the brain will not signal the body that something's wrong because the brain will assume that it's got good pressure. So consider this scenario, that when you have the actual small pipes being blocked off downstream in the small capillary levels, and then blood cannot go through there, each time the heart beats, it creates a pressure wave that comes up here and bang, hits it like a water hammer. And there's no forward flow through these areas, no forward blood flow. Your vital signs remain the same. There's no increase in heart rate. There's no increase in respiration rate. There's no change in blood pressure. But because the brain, with each beat against this closed sort of like pathway, the pressure on the inside of the blood vessel walls here, the brain thinks it's got normal pressure. So nothing changes, and the doctors are blind. You can have a person dying, blowing out their brain in an intensive care unit, and the doctors will not know. They'll be scratching their head. Why is this happening? Normal vital signs? I don't understand what's going on. All of the metabolics and our blood work is all normal. This doesn't make sense. But here you go. When you cannot get through these small blood vessels, and these small blood vessels are serving critical areas in the brain, for example, the control of respiration centers in the base of the brain, a person will die. They'll stop breathing. And in infants we call it sudden infant death. In young children we call it sudden death. In adults we call it sudden death. In schizophrenia patients who are walking across streets and just stop breathing, we call it sudden death. But no one knows the answer as to why. And the reason is the brain determines its needs based on pressure receptors, not flow receptors. And the problem with the adverse response to coagulation and clotting and blood sludging and zeta potential, which we will get to, is a problem with blocking off these small blood vessels and forward flow through many areas of tissue. No forward flow, no oxygen, the brain will end up having strokes, and other organs will have problems as well. But the pressure waves go up and down. It's critical. This is a slide from the Cincinnati Stroke Scale. One image to see the face is perfectly normal, and the corner of the mouth drops. But it's not just the corner of the mouth drops. These two folds here, and until I get back to a healthy lifestyle, they're a bit prominent on me. These two folds here, we call them the nasolabial folds. Nasal meaning nose, labial meaning cheeks. Folds. They have folds here, so you smile and you pull your cheeks out. They're symmetrical on most of us, so they're even in their bulk, the tone of the muscle, and when you look at me or look at another person, you'll see by and large that they're equal in tone and structure and depth and the shadows that they cast. But however, when you're having a stroke up in the brain, it's causing ischemic stroke, a lack of oxygen, you lose this symmetry. And this is a classic thing we look at in medicine as well, neurology. You see the asymmetry in terms of these folds. One's coming down, drooping, and the other one's it's kind of got flat. You've lost the bulk and tone, and the other one's okay. These slides show that exactly, and you see now the smile is becoming asymmetrical after the stroke. We call it a facial droop sometimes as well. The sides of the face do not move symmetrically anymore. The folds and angles carried by the nasolabial folds on both sides become asymmetrical, a bit like this. Strokes, we see it again, undeniable, and that's something that's happening in autistic children as well. This is another slide as well, showing both a woman and a man in an animation and cartoon. Sometimes you can have one of the eyelids affected as well. The 7th cranial nerve acts like a hook and brings the eyelid down with each time you blink. The 3rd cranial nerve acts like 3 pillars that actually opens the eye up and holds it open. So 3 pillars to open the eyelid, 7th cranial nerve, kind of would do this like a 7, hook down to bring it down. So sometimes you can affect those, the blood supply to these nerves as well, and you can actually have difficulties closing the eye, or for that matter, asynchrony, or your eye blinks becoming out of sync because of damage to one side rather than another. You see all these things added up and see them after vaccinations in children developing autism. This is a problem. So a watershed stroke, as this slide is showing, again, it's important to get that concept that watersheds are areas only have one blood supply coming into it, and you block off that blood supply, there's no other blood supply to go pick up the area. Those areas are uniquely susceptible. In many of us, we have some commonalities across individuals that, whether you're genetically linked to a person or not, that you will all have, if you have a certain systemic process that's blocking blood flow, many of you will end up having similar symptoms. Some autistic feature symptoms are classic across the board, say for example, loss of expressive language functions, and the reason so is that certain areas of the body and brain have certain watershed areas irrespective of genes, just the way the system puts itself together. So that's a common thread. However, the rest of what can happen to you in terms of a degree of impairment from an adverse event causing things like autism spectrum or learning disabilities or ADHD, your degree of impairment is a function of the frequency, the duration, whether it's complete or incomplete, and when it occurred in development and how long it lasted for, the blockages of the blood supply. So you can now see the separation between Asperger's syndrome, where children are kind of on the autistic spectrum, but their social skills are primarily at risk with difficulties, and however their language functions can remain in various degrees of normalcy. How you can see that Asperger's now fits in the same continuum as autism, as also attention deficit fits, as well as sudden infant death fits, as well as schizophrenia fits to a certain extent, as well as the gastrointestinal problems, the kidney problems, the liver problems, the bone marrow problems, the immune problems. It's all linked to that same mechanism of the branching vascular network. Same mechanism across all problems here. And the watersheds are very, very important. The end arteries are most susceptible to changes in blood flow. It's a blood flow problem from blood sludging. It's no different from leaving your coffee and your cream in your bottom of your coffee cup for 3 or 4 days. The first day it's nice and liquid, shake it around, wonderful. After a few days of stagnation, it becomes gel. That's what's happening in the blood vessels throughout all the body for all these chronic illnesses and disease. Common mechanism for everything. And it's been known for some time, at least from the 1930s and 40s. We should not be out there running around trying to get vaccines for every possible contaminant that exists on planet Earth that you could possibly get. Millions of things you could vaccinate for. And if the pharmaceutical industry has its way, you would, especially if they convince governments to mandate that you have to have it as a condition of being a member of society. But when all bugs and all viruses and all bacteria and all parasites and all heavy metals and all of these toxic or foreign substances placed in your body, or even prenatal infectious diseases, if they all cause the same problem in the body and physiology, irrespective of the disease that comes out, if they all cause disease by the same problem in the body, they're causing strokes, then why are we wasting our time vaccinating for all these different things, which all, irrespective of what they do to the body, end up having the same common mechanism of injury in the body across the board when you get exposed? Why don't we just go out there and say, let's deal with the cause of disease and get out of the clouds and stop giving prevention for all these different things individually? Well, you can have all these things collectively. as long as you control the means in the body by which these things, irrespectively, are going to cause disease and damage.